Technical difficulties. Oh, y'all funny, huh? Y'all got some jokes out there.
Jeannie, do you want to draw?
No, I want that to be the finale.
Hey, okay, great. No, it's getting stuck. All right, good. It didn't like this first slide. Sorry about that, guys. All right, so some pictures here from when we sheltered in place in 2017. Irma was kind of the last hurricane that we had that had any bite behind it. We sheltered in place here. So what our take is that we kind of want to shelter in place, right? Evacuation, we get a lot of trouble logistically with doing that. So CSU, that's the Colorado State.
Turn that back. There are a couple people on that. Is that Adler right there sitting on the? Yeah.
All right, CSU, that's California State University. That's the forecast. They put it out every year. They determine, they try to determine how many hurricane events we're going to have each year. But it's the standard that they use. Even NOAA uses the California State University standard forecast. So if you see there, the named storms, they expect is 13 named storms total. The average for a 10-year span is about 14.4. The named storm days, 55 days is what they're looking at estimated. And then the average for those 10 years is 69.4 a year. 6 hurricanes, they're projecting 6 total hurricanes, and that, determines wherever it may form, either east or in the Gulf or north. Then you have hurricane days, 35. That's a little higher. So they're predicting a longer period of time for hurricane days than the 10-year span is 27. But again, that's just a prediction. Major hurricanes, they're only predicting 2 major hurricanes this season, as opposed to the 3.2 average we have yearly. 5 major hurricane days as opposed to 7.4. And then the accumulated cyclone energy, we're looking at 100, and the average has been 123. So they're predicting even less severe hurricanes this season, which is a good thing. But like the bottom line there says, remember, it only takes 1 hurricane making landfall to be for an active season. So we are always prepared each season. Disaster preparedness. So LCS gives us resource material. They give us some documentation that we need to fill out. We need to provide them with information. They provide us with information. And then we also have our own resources that we utilize here. And we prepare every year regardless, and we bring out the information. Sometimes we get new information added to it. Sometimes, we don't have any information that we utilize anymore. Some things go away, like our COVID protocols. Things like that go away from what we need to prepare for from a disaster perspective. Practice actual incidents, fire drills, hurricanes. You guys know we do this already. You're with me when we do all these drills. And why we do it is so that you're prepared in the event of a real disaster. Know your role. Each of you in here has a role to play during a disaster. So if you don't know your role, then you need to talk with your manager or director and find out what your role is in preparing for the disaster. Most of you probably already know. For hurricanes, be there. We have vendor contracts. Each of our departments has their own vendors. I have my own vendors. Mary Summer may have her vendors. And we need to get with our vendors so that we know, I'm sorry about that. We need to get with our vendors so that we know what we're needing and if they can supply us with those needs. Generators and fuel. So plant normally will take care of that in coalition with Robert Kozicki there. We'll get all that situated and have that ready. Physical plant, of course, we'll make sure that we get the supplies that we need. Food and supplies, So food and beverage, they play a big role in preparing for disaster preparedness. They need to make sure that we have enough food on hand for whatever it may take if we do a shelter in place. Same thing with dietary. Dietary has a responsibility to feed the folks over at the water's edge. So she has the same thing in place there. Corporate support. So we do get corporate support from LCS. We have contact numbers and stuff that they give us. And whatever we ask for, they would pretty much give us. A lot of us went through a little training program not too long ago that had to do with disasters. One of the companies, 360 Resource or something like that, 360 is one of our vendors. They will come in case we do have a disaster, and they will come assist us. They do water cleanup, things of that nature. And then we have employee staffing. So each of you fills out a sheet of paper from HR that determines, what you're going to do in the event of a disaster. And then health at home. Thank you, Mary Summer, for your help with health at home. If we have a disaster, we need to decide who from health at home can and cannot make it here to look and take care of our residents. And then we need to make alternative arrangements, to make sure that they are taken care of. Communications. So we meet with you guys in May, and we also meet with the residents. Now we do that at Cup of Joe, and we may do that in some of our other committee meetings, but we give them the same spiel we're giving you guys right now. LCS and corporate, they have a website and a hotline. So if you go to the LCS website and we are in an emergency, they will put a blip about us, and then they will give you a number that you can call. That's not just for us, but it's also for, family members. A resident communication, channel 63, we have floor leaders and we have Odyssey. So 63, that's pretty self-explanatory. That's the Comcast channel. Odyssey, pretty self-explanatory. That's one of the sites. And then the floor leaders are residents. So each floor has a floor leader, a resident floor leader that will basically act as a liaison between the residents and our staff. All right, so that's how we keep an eye on everything that's going on at a time. So our emergency evacuation policy is 100% mandatory evacuation. Why does that keep doing that? Some things got a mind of its own. 100% mandatory evacuations if we have no power or no water. So if we have no power here, then there's no way that we can sustain people. We can't cook. We can't do the normal thing. Same thing. See, it just stopped again. What the? I'm not even touching it. It's on the table. Gremlins. All right.
Audrey did it.
Audrey, quit doing that. All right, so we have gremlins, but in all seriousness, we try not to evacuate because logistically it's very difficult. But if we have this, it's no fun, and we're gonna have to evacuate. Where do we evacuate to? So we have evacuation sites. We have reciprocal agreements. I remember that word from this morning. I couldn't remember this morning. So we have agreements in place for us to visit other communities. Other communities have agreements with us to come visit us in case they're in a disaster area. So where are we going to go? Well, if it's only going to hit the East Coast, we can go to the West Coast. But sometimes we don't know, being here in Florida. It can go from the East Coast to the West Coast, or it could be big enough to cover it all. In that case, we would go north. When? So when is the big question? Depending on the scope and scale of the storm and where it's going to hit directly is what was going to determine if we evacuate or when we evacuate. Who? Okay, so know your residents' limitations, needs, and during the evacuation, do we need oxygen? Do we need meds, wheelchairs, etc.? So basically, anything that requires power, can we handle it if we lose the power? Do we have backup plans? Do we have portable tanks to take with us? Things like that. We need to know what we need to get to bring with us. And that's where the next one is. So it also takes trucks, for us to evacuate. That's the other thing that's hard. We would have to rent trucks from somewhere because there's a lot of supplies that we would need to bring with us. We can't just go empty-handed to another site. You need beds, mattresses, wheelchairs. You need the equipment. You need meds. You need all these things. You need people. We need you to evacuate with us so that we can watch our residents. So therein lies another problem logistically. How? So identify your man hours, build relationships and contracts. So it's not just going to other sites. It's also, do we have something in place if we need to go to a hotel? You know, do we have something with corporate? If corporate can assist us in some way to help us relocate, maybe corporate has some buses that they can get a hold of for us. We need to bring a lot of buses in here. So Water's Edge evacuation, again, mutual aid agreements with communities in various parts of the state. See, I didn't touch it. So it's very hard to do. It's very hard to do a move like that, short-term move. So hurricane procedures. So at 96 hours before predicted landfall, and actually before 96 hours, staff and your leadership is already sitting down determining, you know, do we have supplies on hand? Do we have everything we need? What's the path look like? If it adjusted a little bit, are we in the cone? Things of that nature. You know, there was just a big news, I think on the news 2 days ago, they were talking about the cone and what happened last year. Okay, so the hurricane was predicted in this cone, and everybody's looking at the middle of the cone where the line is, saying, okay, well, that's where it's going to hit. And then it wasn't Tampa, it was shifted way farther south. But that area right there was still in that cone of uncertainty. That's why they call it a cone of uncertainty, because nobody knows. It could be anywhere in that cone. Yes, it's a big cone. I know it's 700 miles wide, but you got to take it seriously wherever you're at in that cone, right? So if you're in that cone and you see a Cat 5 or a big Cat 4 coming at you, you probably want to think, maybe we need to go somewhere, right? And it affected that area very significantly. So at 96 hours before landfall is probably where you want to make your decision whether you're going to stay or evacuate. Minimum 72. If you go more than 72, you're in trouble, because 48 hours doesn't give you enough time logistically to even get ready. You got to remember, you got to pack up everybody. You got to pack up all your stuff. And then you got to worry about traffic. Who here remembers the traffic the last hurricane we had trying to go north? So if you were on the road then, I could come south on 95 and I'm cruising. There is no one near me. But everybody going north, it's stacked up. They're not going a mile an hour. And that's what we have to deal with. So we have to be in the 92 to 72 hour area, or the traffic's not going to let us go anywhere anyway. So at 48 hours, typically we're going to shelter in place. Again, that's really what we want to do, honestly. It's so much easier. I know it's a little stressful, but you know, we have it down almost to a science, honestly. We guys, with all of your help, we do so well. So that's the good thing. And 24 hours, that's when we're pretty much deciding whether or not we're going to lock it down. We're going to bring in the people that are staying for the evacuation. And then everybody else is going to go home and wait out the storm. And then after the storm, those people that waited out will come back and relieve the people that sheltered in place. Now we're going to have employees' responsibility. This button's going to jump all over on you.
Okay, how's that? Good to go? All right, so all that stuff that Kurt just talked about, evacuating, is not fun, but it may be necessary. However, our executive director, Sean, his guidance is going to be, if it if it is at all possible, we prefer to shelter in place. Okay, so we're going to talk about both of those options and what your role as an employee is. And so the first thing for you to do is get familiar with that guide that Lori gave you when you came in the door. Okay, I'm going to hold it up for the camera. If you are watching this on Relias, you need to make sure you see your supervisor or HR and collect a copy of the guidebook. It covers a lot of information. It talks about some nomenclature that you will hear on the news that might be important if you had a glossary. If you don't understand what they're talking about, you can look in here and look at some of the glossary terms. Things like the difference between a watch and a warning, the difference between tropical storm and hurricane. So that might be of interest to you. It also covers before, during, and after what our steps are, and we're going to talk a little bit about that today. One of the first things that you're going to want to do is make sure that your supplies at your home are ready to go. Because when we are at those 96, 72, 48 hours out, you don't want to be waiting in the line that is wrapped around the neighborhood trying to put gas in your car. And you don't want to be trying to get your supplies at Home Depot, and you don't want to be trying to find bottled water, right? We want to have all of that stuff in advance ready to go so that we can come here and take care of our residents, which is the role that we signed up to do when we decided to work in this industry. So first and foremost, our employee job descriptions, every single one of them, whether you are the healthcare administrator, a CNA, a maintenance technician, a housekeeper, when you came to work here, you signed your job description, and bullet point number 1 on every one of our job descriptions talks about our role during a storm. And our role is care providers to the residents who live here. So we have to make ourselves available to do that. And so you need to take the time now, early in the season, to take care of your family, have your contingency plan, right? So the next bullet is talking about your pet. If we are sheltering in place here, there was a reference on a previous slide from Kurt that talked about pets. That meant the residents' pets. We don't bring our pets here to shelter with us. We have to ask our daughters or our mothers or our next door neighbors if they can watch our pet in one of these events. You also want to make sure that you complete your emergency contact form. And this is going to indicate what your preference is for which role you would like to be in should we have to handle one of these storms. Okay, and there are some options on there. One of the options is I want to be a part of the team making preparations and then come back and return for cleanup. So those are the people who are not going to shelter here with the residents. Then there are several other options there about sheltering in place here, going on the road if we had to evacuate. You can check those boxes. You can also bring your immediate family members here with you if necessary. So make sure you get that form completed and get that turned in to HR. You can change your mind. And okay, so Ivan brings up a good point. The form is a preference form. If we have 85% of the people say, I want to stay and shelter in place, then there's nobody coming in to relieve us, right? So we might need to make some decisions about the assignments regardless of what you preferred. The converse of that is the same as well. If 85% of the people said, I'm going to help with the preparations, then I'm going to go stay at home and come back and relieve everyone. We are a healthcare community, and we have to have a certain percentage of people here on site during the event. So there may need to be some decisions made about that. All right, so this is your preference form. Let us know your preference. Okay, returning to work or being a part of the workforce during this event is a mandatory part of our job. It is, as we talked about, we signed up in our job descriptions that it is a condition of our employment. But some of you live in flood-prone areas. Some of you have elderly parents. Okay, if there's anything special like that that you need us to know about your circumstances, go ahead and put it on that form, even if there's not a space for it. Just let us know. And the last thing in the world we want is any of you sitting out on the turnpike or I-95 24 hours away from the storm. And so we're going to want you to go sooner than that, so you're not stuck, right? We want you to be able to get back and be one of those people who can relieve the people who stayed here, right? And we not only train this annually, like we are today, we also do it with our new hires in orientation. So if you hired in January, February, March, maybe we didn't hit this really, heavily, but with people who are hiring next week, next month, we're going to make sure we cover it very well with them in orientation. Okay, let's talk about coming back to work in the aftermath of the storm, right? We want to make sure that you are safe to travel. So if we have sheltered in place and power is down, I want you to take a look on the inside back page of your guidebook. There is a list of various phone numbers. And the top line says Life Care Services Toll-Free Hurricane Hotline. Well, guess what? We're not a standalone operation. We work for a corporation, and there are people who live in other locations that will not be experiencing this weather, and they will be out there to help us. And so we have this hotline number. It is a way for you to stay in communication with what's going on at Sandhill Cove, even if we don't have phone service, even if we don't have power. Well, I guess if we don't have phone service, how are you going to call it, right? You're going to be using your transistor radio that you bought in 1998. And then we really don't want anybody coming back to the community before it is safe. So I used an example this morning about if the power lines are down and one of them has fallen in front of the security station out front. We're not coming or going until Florida Power and Light has been out here to secure that. And we might not be the first people on their list. We might have to wait. Okay. Okay. And so let me just take a minute to say how good we are at this. How many of you have actually done an evacuation or a shelter in place here before? Okay, so for those of you who are new and were not able to raise your hand, I'm going to tell you these people who've done it before are very, very good at it. And the reason why we want to train you is so that you can be good at it too. We have really great procedures in place. And in exchange for that, we want to help you and your family. Oh, now I can't make it go. Oh, good to go. Had it. Going to the next one. There we go. Okay, so the residents are depending on all of us, but in exchange for your service to them, we want to be able to provide you with some assistance during this time as well. So if you don't have power and you don't have ice or water or food, you can get that here. We're going to feed our employees who are here and sheltering. And if you are coming in to relieve people, bring your laundry. We have laundry services here. You can have a shower here. As Kurt mentioned, we do have the generators, and that's sometimes very nice. And not all of us have that at home. Thank you, sir. Okay, let's talk about how we get paid while all of this is going on. So if you are a person who shelters in place here, from the moment you arrive at work until whenever you leave here, you will be continuously paid. And that would be if it's 24 hours, if it's 48 hours, if it's 72 hours. That is how that works. If I am a person who is not sheltering in place here, then I will be asked to use my PTO or vacation to be paid during the time when I'm not here. Both of those roles are important, but if you need to make sure that your paycheck is consistent, you might select that option when you're filling out your form. Okay, and then one other thing is that we do have casual attire during the aftermath of the storm. Might not be doing our normal jobs. Okay, I doubt Lori and I are going to be working on recruitment activities while tree limbs are down in the yard and everybody is trying to, figure out where we're going to get our next meal from. Thank you, David and Robert, for that. We might have our shorts on and be out picking up tree limbs, with maintenance and grounds, if that's what needs to be done. And so you should be prepared for that too. Okay, just wanted to mention one more thing about supplies while Kurt is making his way back up here. How many of you have bottled water or beefaroni from last year's hurricane supplies in your pantry? Okay, you might want to eat those up, drink the water. It's really recommended that you only keep bottled water for about a year. So check the expiration date. I'm echoing off of you.
Yeah.
And, use up those ramen noodles and go buy you some new ones.
Okay, so one of the drills we do every year is a power outage drill. At that time, we also test the main breaker. So we do that at night, so it actually simulates, the worst, most severe condition that we can get. And also when we do this power outage drill, we turn the automatic transfer switch off, which means that when the power goes out, the generator is not going to come on. So we're lucky enough to live in a place where we have multiple generators, and those generators will turn on automatically if we lose the FPL electric power. So each generator runs, at a different time based on the size of the gas tank, of course, and how big the engine is. But when we get low on gasoline, we do have a service come in and refill us. So the reception will advise maintenance and other key personnel by announcing an emergency over the radio. So if we have a power outage, that's what the receptionist is going to do. In the event that we have no receptionist or it's at night, then it will be the nurse's charge to notify security, right? Security then will notify the executive director. After the nurse notifies security, then the nurse should be notifying the administrator. If the administrator is on vacation and not available, then the director of nursing needs to be notified. So that's the next step. The third step you need to do is you need to call 1-800-4-OUTAGE. Everybody see that number? 1-800-4-OUTAGE. You should memorize that number because that's the FPL number that you call when you have a power outage. So if you have a power outage in your area, you give that number a call. It's going to tell you how severe the outage is, what the scope of the outage is, and how long the outage is going to last. All right, so always check that. The reason you're calling security first is because you want to identify whether or not it's just your building or if it's actually community-wide, right? Because if it's affecting the security, because they're up front, you're going to know whether or not it's just a building or community-wide. Plus, you want them to be on hand to assist. At the gate, they have extra flashlights and they have extra radios that they can bring to help assist. tornado procedures. Every year also, we do a tornado drill. That's a Central Florida Coalition drill that we do. It's called the Great Tornado Drill. So when we have that, the first thing we do is we call out our tornado watch, and that comes from the gate. The gate will call a tornado watch because they have a NOAA radio up there. And it's a 24/7 radio that notifies us of weather emergencies. So once security gets the notice of a watch, they'll call it out on the radio. They'll also call Water's Edge, and then we'll act accordingly. Maintenance, if they're here, they'll go to their stations. They'll be ready to shut down water and power and things of that nature. And then on the radio also, you have housekeeping that'll come to assist with that. Then when we call Water's Edge and we call the receptionist, the main receptionist, and Water's Edge in addition, they will do their procedures to start battening down the hatches. When we get the warning, that's when we go into bringing everybody out in the hall, having everybody face the wall, holding a pillow to protect their chest, and using a blanket to cover their heads to protect their heads and backs, right? And we face everybody toward the wall. That's the little turtle shell that they say, right? Duck and cover. So anyway, we do these drills annually. We do these and other drills. We just wanted to hit on these couple here. Next, we're going to go into active shooter. We do have a video. It's about 11, 12 minutes. We're going to stop it at the summary spot. So we're going to go through the video, and as soon as you see the summary pop, we're going to stop the video there, and then we're going to discuss a little bit. Okay? Enjoy the video. Okay, yeah, make sure we stop when it says summary. Yeah, it'll pop up on there. We don't need to go through that.
Shots fired in the workplace. The last sound you'd expect to hear. The odds of being involved in a situation like this are similar to your chances of being struck by lightning. It's a strange thing about lightning, though. We use it as a way to describe something that seemingly has no chance of happening. But how many of us would stand next to a metal pole during a thunderstorm? I'm Randy Spivey. And I'm Jim Sporleader, both from the Center for Personal Protection and Safety. The possibility of being involved in an active shooter situation is very remote. But the consequences are so potentially catastrophic that it makes good sense for you to spend some time thinking and preparing for it. Active shooter used to be a phrase used only by law enforcement. But as these events have spread, it's something people in all types of organizations have had to learn about and prepare for, even in hospitals and other healthcare facilities, places that used to be considered safe havens.
Violence in healthcare is really on the rise. We want to protect the caregivers and our patients at all costs.
It is not a safe haven. It can happen anywhere. Anywhere that there's human congregation and activity, there can be violence.
Security can vary significantly from one healthcare setting to the next. Size, location, and budgetary issues can all have an impact. But even in hospitals with a large and well-trained security department, there still exist vulnerabilities.
There's not enough security people to protect the entire hospital.
They can't be everywhere. They're not at every door.
To be clear, we're not asking you to take on new and additional responsibilities. The fact is, an active shooter event is an extreme situation, one that requires everyone involved to be a stakeholder in their own survival.
You're part of that team. You're part of that response. You're part of the whole process.
This is especially true during what we call the extreme danger gap, that period of time between the onset of extreme violence and the arrival of law enforcement. It's critical to understand that in the extreme danger gap, Anything you do or don't do could have life-threatening consequences. That's why thinking in advance about what your options are is so important.
This is especially true for healthcare professionals. You embrace a duty of care commitment that compels you to be more than just a survivor, but a protector as well.
There are many things you can do to survive and protect others during an active shooter incident. The most effective option starts right now with developing a survivor-protector mindset.
In the healthcare environment, every team member, every employee needs to be empowered. They need to realize that they are not only a survivor, but a survivor protector.
The survivor protector mindset is what we learn and nurture when we train for the unthinkable. It includes the willingness to accept the possibility that we could find ourselves in a life-threatening situation with split-second choices to make.
It's having the life-saving practical sense to think through those choices now, when you're not in danger, and when you can ask the what-if questions.
Training, planning, and rehearsing ahead of time will enhance your sense of control in a chaotic situation and strengthen your commitment to both survive and protect.
You and your colleagues train to deal with life and death situations already. You have protocols. In some ways, preparing for the possibility of an active shooter is no different than preparing to deal with a fire.
We train, we look at race and past, and what would I do if that horrific thing ever occurred? And it's very similar.
I am paying more attention to each room that I work in and each area so that I can look at where I think things might happen, pay attention to which room's locked, which ones don't.
Research shows there are important differences between the reactions of people who've been trained to face stressful, life-threatening situations and those who have not.
In most cases, the first response is the same in both groups: startle and disbelief. Even trained individuals are likely to feel disbelief when they suddenly find themselves in a potentially life-threatening situation.
And it's natural to feel fear as well, regardless of how well trained you are. But getting through that initial disbelief and fear and into assessment and action is the key to survival.
Trained individuals are better prepared to do that. Untrained individuals are likely to remain in disbelief.
Remember, this is the time you're in the extreme danger gap, a time when seconds can make a life and death difference. And it's a time when the gap between trained and untrained gets wider.
Trained individuals begin to recall what they've learned, thought about, and rehearsed. Untrained individuals simply react and are likely to sink into denial. This can't be happening to me.
Trained individuals consider options and prepare to act just as they've rehearsed. Untrained individuals may descend into a state of helplessness, some literally frozen in fear.
Freezing is the most unproductive human response there is. We don't want our staff to freeze. So part of this whole program is to give people options and to get them to think about what they can do as opposed to becoming so fearful that they do nothing and become a victim.
The key to successfully responding as a trained individual is thinking about it in advance. Watching this program is an important first step, but to be really prepared, you'll need to do a bit more.
It's important you also spend some time going through the what-ifs that apply to your specific work area, ideally with the other individuals you work with. And be sure to become familiar with your organization's policies and procedures as related to this kind of situation.
Active shooter events are highly dynamic. They're usually over quickly and can happen anywhere. But there are some basic actions that successful survivor protectors take. We call them the 4 A's: accept, assess, act, and alert.
First, it's important that you accept the situation you find yourself in is real and actually happening. Often, survivors of active shooter incidents report that the sounds they heard didn't sound like gunshots, probably because real gunshots don't sound like the ones we hear in movies and TV shows. When in doubt, act as if it's real.
And if you have visual confirmation, try hard not to freeze in shock. A firearm in your workplace will be a startling sight. Accept what you see and work to move through your disbelief.
The second A is for assess. Assess the situation. What's going on? Where's the shooter? These are questions you should continue to ask because the situation will likely change second by second.
The third A is act. You basically have three options: avoid, barricade, or fight.
Avoid simply means to get as far away from the shooter as you can, especially if it means you'll be able to get help. Barricade includes any action that might keep the shooter from reaching you, like hiding in a room and locking or blocking the door. As a last resort, fight only applies if you find yourself face to face with the shooter and with no way to avoid or barricade.
The fourth A is for alert. Be sure to call the appropriate emergency response number. If your facility has panic buttons or silent alarms, use them as quickly as possible. Accept, assess, act, and alert.
Those critical seconds of being able to know that, all right, if these are the four things, I need to make sure I do those. That's critical.
This is a circle. It's a continual circle, because when there's a deadly event or deadly assault going on, whatever we call it, whatever we define it, it's dynamic and it's going to move fast. We know that.
Now find Dr. Meyer.
Oh my God, he's got a gun.
Those first few seconds could mean life or death for you and those individuals under your care.
In all cases, the goal is to survive and protect, but your options will depend on how close you are to the shooter.
If you hear a code or emergency announcement over the PA system and it appears the danger is relatively far away, you'll still need to take immediate steps to protect your patients and yourself.
Be sure to know what the procedures are for your area and follow them immediately.
Obviously, the greatest level of threat is if the shooter is in your immediate proximity, especially if he's visible. In this situation, your previous training and rehearsal will be vital.
In an instant, you'll need to assess how best to balance your roles as survivor and protector. Are you alone, or are there others close to you? What's their mobility, and can they help you and themselves? Are you near patient rooms? Do you know which rooms can be locked from the inside?
If you're in imminent danger, your actions need to be immediate. If there are people you can guide to safety while also taking shelter yourself, do so quickly and with authority.
Patient rooms are often equipped with fire doors that may offer protection. Bathrooms, which can be locked, might also be a good place to shelter those who can enter quickly.
Any other room that can be locked is also a potential shelter. If there are interior windows, be sure to block them if you can and turn out the lights to make the room appear unoccupied.
In patient rooms, beds can be used as barricades with the brakes locked. And though you'll want to move a patient away from the door, the first priority should be to barricade.
You know what? Obviously, the most dangerous situation is if the shooter is in your immediate area and you have no direct means to avoid or barricade.
If you're trapped in an open area with no real hiding options, and
if there are two or more of you, resist the urge to huddle together. Instead, try to spread out and make a plan to act as a team to overcome the shooter if necessary.
most rooms are full of things that can be effective tools for defense.
Anything that's hard that can create, you can hit the individual with. Whatever it takes, throw something in their face. A powder fire extinguisher. You can take a powder fire extinguisher off the wall and spray powder in their face from 20 feet away.
Directly confronting the shooter is a critical decision only you can make.
I cannot tell you to fight it, but if you make that decision, you're fighting for your life and the life of others, and you do whatever it takes to neutralize that individual, to stop that person.
Yelling and throwing things can startle, distract, impair, or even injure your attacker. And remember, too, that he's only fully armed while he still has the use of his hands. He may have the gun, but if you control his hands, he won't be able to use it.
It's important for you to be aware of a type of incident that's similar to an active shooter event, namely a hostage-taking situation. The hostage taker wants to use people as leverage to achieve a goal. This is very different than the active shooter, who is simply there to take lives.
If you find yourself in a hostage situation, remain calm, follow directions, and wait for authorities to resolve the situation. Try not to say anything confrontational or aggressive. Historically, the vast majority of hostage incidents are resolved through negotiations, and they end peacefully.
But the situation could change and become an active shooter incident. That's why it's so important to keep assessing the situation moment by moment.
The extreme danger gap ends when law enforcement arrives. But it's still a very dangerous situation until they succeed in ending the violence. And it's important to be aware that they'll have no way of knowing immediately whether or not you're a threat, even if you're wearing scrubs or a uniform.
When officers arrive, be prepared to calmly, quickly, and accurately tell them what they need to know. The location of the shooter, number of shooters if there's more than one, description of the shooter, and the number and kinds of weapons he has.
The officers have been taught that hands kill, so show your hands and follow their instructions.
We're not going to necessarily be friendly. If we ask you questions, respond as concise and quickly as possible and do what we tell you to do. Because the more time we spend with you, the less time we're going to be able to go and handle the threat and save other people's lives that could possibly be in danger.
We spend less time with them and we go straight up to the target.
All right, so just to add a couple things about law enforcement. When you raise your hand, spread your fingers like this, okay? They need to see in between your fingers. Make sure you're not holding anything. Also, if there are injuries there at location, police are not going to stop and try to help anybody, right? Their number one priority, their number one goal is to get the shooter. Make sure that the scene is safe. They're not going to let fire department in. So fire department's not going to be able to come in and help at all either. So if you're there and you know how to, administer some first aid, then you're the one that's going to need to do it. Until there's an all clear, when the fire department would then be able to take over. Also, you saw in there panic buttons. Does everybody here know where our panic buttons are? Everybody? Everybody knows, right? Nobody knows. Okay, so at each reception desk, the reception desk in the clubhouse, the reception desk in Water's Edge has a panic button. So it would be in your best interest. I was going to say behoove, but that's neither here nor there. But it will be in your best interest to go over there and find out where that panic button is. Okay, so everybody knows where it is in case we have this situation. Okay, I think there's one more slide. Everybody know what that is? That's our emergency code cards. Okay, we give those out to every new hire. Some of you guys have gotten handed additional ones, but we're going to go over the color codes. The first one is code red. What's code red? Fire. How do you know when there's a code red? Because you'll see me wearing a red shirt. If you see me wearing a red shirt, you know exactly why I'm wearing a red shirt. But if you don't see me wearing a red shirt, it's because I'm being sneaky. Because I'm not supposed to tell you when we're having a code red. It's supposed to be a surprise so we can see how you react. Because in a real emergency, in a real fire, the fire is not going to tell you. It's just going to happen, right? All right, code blue is a medical emergency. Code black is a bomb threat. Code silver is a missing person, otherwise known as a what drill? An elopement drill. So we do have an elopement drill coming up. So I hope you're ready for it because I'm not going to tell you when it's going to be. It's a surprise. Code orange is a hazardous material. And then for extreme weather, for an active shooter, or for the all clear, we're going to use plain language, right? Plain language. So there's no confusion when we have one of those serious events. Okay, that's the end of my presentation. Does anybody have any questions? Would anybody like to add anything? Jeannie, wonderful.
Just so you guys all know, I have looked at the names of the 2023 storms